يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program. It's a Wednesday morning and this is Let's Talk. We're coming to you live from Sunning Hill in Johannesburg. On the show this morning, we're going to be talking to an angel of mercy, and that, of course, I'm referring to David Stanton. He is a paramedic. We're going to look at a day in the life of a paramedic. We're also going to be looking at the Blue Whale suicide game, and we'll be wrapping up by talking to the brain guru. She is Colleen Lightbody, and she's going to be talking to us about how to train your brain. Yes, it is possible, and if you're a bit slow or backward or just not using your brain to its full potential, she's going to be telling us exactly how you can tap into your brain and get the most out of it. All of that on the show, and please do become a part of the conversation on the open lines. Now, it's also Hypertension Awareness Day today, so please, that means that if you are 18 years or older, go and have your high blood, go and get yourself checked out and check that your pressure is okay within the limits. If you are over the age of 40, then you need to make certain that this is done at least annually. It is said that 1 in 5 people in South Africa, not globally, 1 in 5 people actually present with a stroke on a daily basis, and 1 in 10 people on a daily basis in South Africa present with a heart attack. And of those, I'm not sure how many do actually die from their specific attacks. So please do be aware of well, it's not international, but South African Hypertension Day, and make sure that you take control of your condition. Let's get to our first interview and our angel of mercy. He is David Stanton, and he's going to be talking to us about paramedics. Morning, welcome to the show.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here, because I think you're going to be sharing a lot of information that we take for granted. Now, you are a paramedic. You are the head of clinical leadership at Netcare 911.
That's right.
How did you get there, and what made you follow this line of work?
I've probably been in the paramedic world since I left school a couple of years ago. I've been with Netcare 911 throughout, working on the road for a number of years. I then spent a couple of years in the training college as a lecturer there, and now I moved on to provide some leadership to the more junior colleagues.
What does it take to become a paramedic? I should imagine it's a certain type of person, because you're having to deal with very traumatic, or mainly traumatic situations on a regular basis.
Yeah, so it takes a certain type of personality. They're usually the more type A personality people. They have to be able to walk into a situation, be it in somebody's home or on the side of the road, and take control of what can be chaos sometimes, and turn it into order. They walk into somebody's home where there's panic, where there's a really bad thing going on, and provide calm and some guidance to the family, some guidance to the ambulance crews. You can't be a person who panics if something goes wrong. You need to be the level-headed person.
You can't be someone like myself who, the moment you see blood, faints.
That doesn't help, no.
Okay, let's look at the kind of training that's involved and the time period.
So we're moving into some new qualifications, so I'll only talk about those, where there's essentially 3 that are available. There's a 1-year higher certificate, there's a 2-year diploma program, and then there's a 4-year degree program. You don't have to do them in sequence, you access whichever one you can. They have their own academic requirements. But we've recently moved over to this more higher education styled form of training to try and up the level of academic knowledge and skill within the emergency service environment.
Are more and more young people gravitating to this field as a profession, as a preferred profession?
I don't know if it's more. We've always had a fairly high interest.
Oh, lovely.
It's seen, I don't know if it's seen a little bit as a glamorous profession, the flashing lights, the excitement, the adrenaline. So it is quite popular amongst younger people.
Saving lives,
yeah,
being a
saving
hero
lives.
for the moment.
You know, there's been all these dramatic TV programs
Yes.
where they show everything. It's not all like that. You know, they sometimes say it's hours of sheer boredom with a few minutes of terror. So it's not suited to everybody. It attracts a lot of people. We always say before you commit to a career in being a paramedic, rather maybe spend some time getting some experience and seeing if it's for you, if the environment is, or you can be comfortable in the environment, because it isn't for everybody.
Do you find that paramedics burn out easily, that their lifespan is not as long as in any other profession? And that being said, I should imagine you have lots of regular debriefing or supervision sessions just to check that they're okay, that they can continue doing the work for the next 24 hours or the next week or two.
Yeah. The South African paramedic setting has a very high rate of burnout. We don't see a lot of paramedics working into their 40s and 50s. They don't last that long.
Sure.
It's got to do with the rate of really bad trauma that they see. You know, if you go to the United Kingdom, the guys work their entire careers as a paramedic and they go in pension from being a paramedic. But their rate of really bad trauma and bad experiences is not as much as what we see here. We try fairly hard. I think we can do a lot better though at looking after our staff and doing some form of debriefing. Our guys are so busy though that we struggle to fit it in. If you go to some of the Australian systems, for example, if you attend a really bad incident, you immediately get taken away for debriefing and you don't do any more work until they're comfortable that you are
okay.
over it and you're okay. Where in South Africa, where unfortunately you finish with a bad incident, you pack your bags and you get into the next one. We have far less paramedics than most other countries in the world, particularly of the advanced paramedics with the higher qualifications. So
simply because they're leaving the profession earlier than expected?
So we have a large number that leave the profession. We also unfortunately have a fairly large number that leave the country. As with a lot of other highly skilled professionals, you can earn dollars in some parts of the world. So that has quite a big draw on our profession as well.
There are certain communities throughout the country who have their own team of paramedics simply because, well, there are various reasons for that. How do you at Netcare 911 and the state paramedic units respond to something like that? Is that a hindrance or does that really support you guys?
In the majority of situations, they're a great support. Most of the community-based services are well trained. If they have the resources, they're well equipped, and usually within the emergency services, there's a big amount of teamwork. Everybody gets on. There's a common purpose, so nobody gets in anybody's way, and the community-based services ensure that people often get services a little bit quicker. So I would say they in general augment the services. There's the few that are difficult and maybe not there for the right reasons. By and large, though, they're great. We enjoy working with them.
They're well-meaning, obviously.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about the type of training that paramedics undergo, but let's talk about you as clinical leadership, head of clinical leadership. What exactly is it that you do at Netcare 911 Emergencies?
So the name sort of gives it away. It's providing clinical guidance and clinical leadership within Netcare 911. It's everything from reviewing cases that our staff have been to, writing policies on how to provide better clinical care, engaging with some of the external service providers, engaging with hospitals, doing follow-ups on some of the patients that we look after to see where we can improve. There's some real-time things, so I'll attend some incidents with Netcare 911 paramedics just to see how they're doing. Obviously, I have to keep myself up to date to a large extent. It's just providing some clinical guidance. In the corporate world nowadays, it's often all about management and finances, and we've found we just have to focus a bit on the actual clinical part of what goes on as well.
So let's talk about a day in the life of a paramedic. So Netcare 911, I presume you service all the Netcare hospitals and you'd liaise with them and be in touch on a regular basis. There should be lots of briefing going on between the ambulance service and the actual outpatients or emergency wards, etc. How does that all work? We see all the glamorous stuff on TV, but I'm sure there's lots more that happens behind the scenes.
As with any other job, there's a lot of admin that happens. So most of our hospitals will have ambulances and some response cars based out of all of our hospitals. And our guys work 12-hour shifts, so usually 6:30 in the morning till 6:30 in the evening, or opposite to that. They'd arrive early for their shift because they have to make sure that their vehicle is equipped, all the stock is on it, the oxygen cylinders are full, all of those things, and that'll take some time. They'll check every piece of equipment to make sure that they have everything that they're supposed to. There's often handovers from what happened during the day, what's expected during the evening, if there's any particular special events that are happening, any concerns of what's happening in their area at that particular time. Some liaison with what's going on in the hospital. Hospitals also get full sometimes, so sometimes the hospital's going to say, well, we're struggling with beds at the moment, so don't bring us patients at the moment, give us a couple of hours, rather go somewhere else for a little bit. And then obviously they're letting the call centre know that they're available. Our call centre also runs a 24-hour service, 12-hour shifts with the people that work in there.
Okay, we're going to talk about the call centre and the correct numbers to call in emergencies, but right after the ad break. I'm talking to David Stanton. He is here from Netcare 911. We're talking paramedics and we're talking emergencies. Anything and everything you'd like to know about this service, please do call us in on the open line and do become a part of the conversation. Stay with us. We're going for an ad break. David Stanton is in studio with us. He's from Netcare 911. We're talking paramedics, we're talking emergencies, we're talking about, or we're going to try and cover everything you need to know in an emergency situation. Do stay with us and do remember the lines are open. Now, before we get to what to do in an emergency, I'm absolutely hopeless. As we speak here, I wouldn't know what to do, but we will get there in a minute or two. But let's just talk about the type of training that the paramedics undergo.
So in their training courses, no matter which one they would do, it would start at the basics, anatomy and physiology. We in fact even do some chemistry and some physics so that they can understand how the world works and how people work.
Do they need to have those subjects in matric?
Yeah, they'll need to do the sciences and maths to get into the paramedic programs.
Okay.
It's quite a science-filled qualification. They spend then a lot of time working out the pathophysiology, so what goes wrong in the human body, and then the emergency care of all of those things. Most of the qualifications also include some rescue, so how to get people out of cars when they're trapped, how to abseil down the side of the mountain to get to patients. Those are all included in most of the programs. And then included in their program will also be quite a bit of practical placement. So they'll spend some time in hospitals, working in hospitals, obviously under supervision of the doctors and nurses, providing care, learning how to do various procedures. They also spend most of their practical time working on ambulances, also again under supervision with people watching them, but learning the job in a supervised way. So I've always thought if I was a patient, I would like to be treated by a student for the simple reason he's at his best and he's being supervised while he's doing it. So don't ever be scared if there's paramedic students helping you, because I think you tend to get... And
I'm always of the opposite view. I wouldn't dare want a student to work on me. You've just made me change my mind.
Yeah, as I say, they're under direct supervision of a senior paramedic. They're not going to let things go badly, and they desperately want it to go well because they're being mentored and they're being taught and they're being probably examined at the same time as to what they're doing. So, and that's the only way, unfortunately, that paramedics can learn. You can only learn so much from a plastic person, a mannequin in a classroom. You need to be doing the job. It's the mentorship. It's how people learn in most ways is under good supervision, and we do exactly the same thing.
Now, whilst you're at an accident scene or a scene of trauma, is there any two-way communication going on with you and the emergency ward at the hospital to say, this is what's going down here and we're bringing X amount of patients in and you need to have the following doctors and nurses and hospital staff on standby to deal with this particular emergency, and in the meantime you're busy stabilizing those patients?
Yeah, there's sort of two components. The one is if there's many patients, we're often communicating with the hospitals to see which hospital can accommodate how many patients, so we can not overload one particular hospital all at once. And then also, especially around the critically ill or injured patients, we're communicating with the hospital so that the care can be provided early. You know, sometimes a specific problem needs a particular specialist. So they've got to go and make sure that that specialist isn't up in his room somewhere. That specialist needs to be meeting the patient in the emergency department. So there's a lot of communication going on to the hospitals.
We often hear horror stories about the ambulance not reaching the accident scene or the scene of trauma timely, resulting in the patient having died or the patients having died. I've also read and heard about the ambulance only getting there 4 hours later. And then there's all of these stories that go around. Your response to that, why does that happen?
So
because you did indicate before the ad break that you've got a very well-equipped call centre and you guys are in contact all of the time with the ambulance, with the hospitals, etc.
Yeah, so there's a few reasons. I would say one of them is, first off, people don't always call the right number. So if you don't phone an emergency services, if you need the ambulance and you phone the police, there's immediately going to be a delay because there's a broken telephone coming in. They may not post the message on straight away. Some people phone the insurance company when they have an accident and expect an ambulance to arrive. So part of it is the initial communication. The other part of it is sometimes, depending on where you are, resources can be limited. So there's certain parts of the country where they're just a very limited number of ambulances and a large number of incidents. So you end up just being put in the queue because there's just so many resources, and that's unfortunately the best that service in that area can do. Sometimes, especially if you're running a national service, communications can be interesting. So somebody will say, I've had an accident in Church Street.
Church Street where?
You know, every town, every
got a
small
church
little
street.
rural town's got a church street. So those complications sometimes happen. And that's why it's really important if you phone for an ambulance to give them your contact number, because if they realize that they've gone to the wrong church street, they need to be able to phone you back and say, hold on, where exactly are you? You know, call takers can be human and they can type in the number 24 Church Street instead of 42 Church Street, and then the ambulance goes to the wrong house. So while accuracy is obviously always important to us, errors creep in from time to time. I must say that argument about vehicles being delayed it does happen, we know it happens, but the majority of cases, whether it's in private or in state, the ambulance is arriving within acceptable timeframes. It's a very small number of times.
What is acceptable?
I think the Department of Health put out some numbers a while ago that they said in urban areas they consider around 20 minutes acceptable, and obviously rural areas they can't put times to, because that if you're 2 hours away from the closest ambulance, you can't put a time onto it because you can't get it any faster than 2 hours. But within the urban area, less than 20 minutes. We're pushing for 12 minutes within our service.
What happens if, and we spoke about this off air just now, I was not aware of it. I just realized now that if you're with a private medical scheme, your medical scheme would give you an emergency number. What if you're not with a medical scheme and you're obviously reliant on the state hospitals or the state service, and we phone Netcare 911? Would you still come out to me? And you know, thank God I've never ever had to phone an ambulance service, and I pray that I don't ever have to. But what happens if I do have to? Do I need to give them my medical aid details on the phone? Because in that minute, in that moment of panic, I'm not going to remember all of those details.
Absolutely. So the way that it works, and in fact we're legally obliged to abide by these, is if it's a life-threatening emergency, the medical aid details, all of the financial stuff goes out the window. If it's life-threatening, any service is obliged to provide emergency care. So if somebody's been shot in the chest, we're not going to first ask, well, do they have a medical aid before we help them? we help them, and those questions can come later, and those issues can be resolved afterwards.
So this is a state patient. He doesn't have medical aid. You'd go there, pick him up, stabilize him, and take him to the state hospital.
We would. If it's life-threatening, absolutely. If it's not life-threatening, we'll ask the questions. And it's unfair to some people to say, well, we'll just take you to hospital and then 2 weeks later they get an account. If it's not life-threatening, we will have the conversation first and say, we're able to provide you with a service. It's going to cost money. Do you want the private service, or can we send you a state ambulance instead? For non-life-threatening emergencies. Life-threatening, the service gets provided. We ethically and legally can't withhold emergency care. That wouldn't be right.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I suppose some of the complaints are then perhaps from the state patients, because when they get picked up by 911, they're almost expecting to go to a private facility, not realizing that obviously you're not going to be able to afford to pay for it. So Netcare 911 has no option but to take them to a state facility.
Yeah. I mean, anybody has the right to choose to go to a private facility. Whether the private facility will accept you if you don't have a medical aid and you can't afford to pay it. Again, if it's life-threatening, they're obliged to. They can't not accept a patient.
So basically, they'll stabilise you and then send you on back to the state.
That's it.
Okay. Do they charge the state for that?
They don't. No.
For that stabilisation,
no.
They don't. There's been a lot of concern recently on another media platform. I watched a documentary on the attack on ambulance, paramedics. This is particularly in the Western Cape. How worried are you about that situation, and what are you guys doing to contain it?
Yeah, so we're exceptionally worried about it. It's growing. We've seen 1 or 2 incidents happen in Johannesburg. I know in the Western Cape setting, we've actually sort of designated certain areas as no-go zones, or what they're calling red zones, where they'll only send an ambulance in with police escort. It's not a great solution, but it's the only way we can protect our staff. It unfortunately means that the service to the patient is delayed because they have to wait for somebody from the police to arrive before they can go into those areas. But if it's not safe for them to go there, then we'd rather protect the resource, because that ambulance still has to go and help another 50 patients that day. We can't have it being attacked on one incident. We're trying to engage with communities as much as possible, just to say, understand that if your community, that area becomes identified as a dangerous place, the service to your area is going to be delayed. So help us as much as possible. If you know that there's a particular problem, report it to the police. If someone needs an ambulance, maybe have some of the community members out in the street to maybe not protect us, but just to make everybody a bit more aware that the community needs help. It doesn't need to be interfered with by having the emergency services delayed.
The correct procedure and number to call in an emergency.
Okay, so once you've decided that it's an emergency, the most important thing to do is try and be calm. It's probably the most...
Tall order.
Tall order, absolutely. There's some tricks. And you mentioned earlier you may just freeze in the situation. Well, standing still for a moment or two is not a bad idea, because if you can force yourself to stand still for a moment, you give yourself time to think. The human instinct is, I must dive in and I must help. If you can just stand still for a moment and just go, well, what's actually happening here? It gives you that moment to go, well, what must I do next? Because obviously getting help is important. Phone one of the emergency services, so a number like 082 911 for an emergency service, and tell them exactly what's going on. So they're going to ask a few questions. What's going on is important, because they've got to send you the right resource. If there's a taxi accident and there's 20 patients, it doesn't help we send one ambulance. We need to send a lot of resources. They're going to ask the exact address. You'll be amazed how many people don't know the address of where they are on any given time. Or we see people that are at the shops and they make a phone call and they give their home address, which...
in the moment of panic.
Absolutely. So the exact address is quite important, and a location, so the closest crossroad, if it's a long road. A big landmark, we're across the road from the police station. It just helps us get to you a little bit faster. And then that phone back call, your phone number is really important, because if there's a delay, if they got the message wrong,
isn't it?
Yes, because now it exists, which means somebody that does have a problem the resource isn't available to them. So we use the phone back number, because if we phone you back and it's actually your phone number, then we know.
Apart from the hoax callers, what should you not do in an emergency?
One of the important things to do is don't put yourself in harm's way. So if the situation is dangerous, and you can, remove yourself from the situation. If there's a person lying in the middle of the freeway, don't park your car and walk into the middle of the freeway. It's almost never safe to stop.
But don't move the person.
Don't move the person, but make sure that you as the non-injured person are safe, because if there's a gas-filled room and you go in to try and help them, now we end up having 2 patients and nobody is organising help. So ensuring your own safety is probably one of the more important things to do. And we said be calm, because that's quite important. And then provide the care that you can. Provide the care that you're comfortable with. You know, some people have done first aid courses, so they're a lot more comfortable, they have a bit more knowledge in what to do. Sometimes an injured person, though, just needs somebody to be there. You know, that they know that they're not alone.
Hold their hand.
Simple things like stop bleeding, which is life-saving. You know, if you can save somebody's life by stopping bleeding, you've done an amazing service to humankind. So, and those things are not hard. You don't have to go on difficult training to stop bleeding. It's taking a towel or a shirt or something and just pushing it against the part that's bleeding. Unfortunately,
that's all we have time for. But thank you so much for unpacking the life in the day of angels of mercy like yourselves, Nick and 911. It's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And that then brings us to the end of the first interview of the morning. We are waiting to hear from you on the open line. Still to come on the show, we're going to be talking to the brain guru, and thereafter we're going to be talking about the blue whale suicide game. So do stay with us, and do remember to keep us company, inshallah. Welcome back, and still to come on the show, we're going to talk to the brain guru. Her name is Colleen Lightbody. She is the final interview of the morning, but right now we're going to be talking to Nkeni Pasha. He volunteers at SADC, and he's here to talk to us about the blue whale suicide game, and time permitting, we're also going to be talking about Bluetooth, which is another very worrying activity taking South African townships by storm. So do stay with us. This is a very serious matter. Nkeni, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Lovely to have you here. And I must say, when you walked in, I thought there was a model walking off the pages of one of those Vogue or men's magazines. But you tell me that
Thank you for the compliment.
You tell me that you're a medical scientist. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about yourself and what is it that you do?
Professionally, I'm a medical scientist, as I indicated, and I specialize in hematology, which is the study of blood. So I practiced for a number of years before I decided to jump ship, and I went into corporate. I went and joined the pharmaceutical industry, and part of what I was doing in the pharma industry led me to then get into CNS, which is the central nervous system, or psychiatry or psychology, with my involvement at the time with the company that I was working for. And that then led me to be part of the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. So I've been part of SADC for over 10 years,
Oh, wow.
for many years, and really, for me, it's something that is very close to my heart. It's one of my passions. Understanding that in South Africa, we're still really not where we should be in terms of mental health and mental illnesses, and people understanding, that these are medical conditions, and just, spreading the awareness and creating, that education around these illnesses to ensure that we can destigmatize mental health and ensure that people that are suffering from mental illnesses are not discriminated. So that is really has been the driving force, for me to, become part of SADC, and why I've lasted for so many years with SADC.
Lovely.
Yes.
I have no doubt that you're making a very, very positive input at SADC.
Thank you.
Let's just go back a couple of steps and talk about stigmatization and marginalization of mental health patients. Why do you think that is, and what can we do to turn the situation around?
You know, when people don't know something, you know, the fear of the unknown, they tend to create myths around it. So it is exactly these myths that, you know, are resulting in the stigma and the discrimination of people suffering from mental illnesses. So the lack of awareness, you know, is what then is also driving this. But we also know, you know, that there are some cultural beliefs,
Absolutely.
you know, that also fuels the stigma of mental illnesses. You know, if you look at African people, for example, there's
Not only African, also in the Indian communities, Indian
know,
and coloured.
you know,
And sadly, you know, we sweep this under the carpet.
we do, you know, we do, because, you know, we are ashamed to talk about it, because why? The society is not welcoming, you know, of anyone who is mentally ill. There are very bad words that are used to define somebody who is living with a type of a mental illness. What I wanted to say specifically about African people, I mean, we heard, you know, a couple of weeks ago, our president making really some remarks that are quite dangerous, that are quite unfortunate, where he said that, you know, stress is a white man's disease.
Oh, goodness me.
Those are the type of, you know, perceptions and you know,
stupid
phrases,
remarks that
remarks
get
like
made.
that actually, you know, then fuels, you know, the stigma. So people, if you are living with a mental illness or you are going through stress, you know, you're going to then doubt yourself. You're going to then feel completely guilty, you know, and feel, you know, unworthy, because here you are going through something that you should not be going through, something that it's not classified as, you know, African people's, you
Not
know,
acceptable.
condition, not acceptable. You know,
No
so those
empathy
are
for the condition.
No empathy whatsoever, and that then makes people not to want to come forth, and also that drives the stigma, the discrimination, the, you know, marginalization that you referred to, which is quite dangerous, unfortunately, because we know that if that is left untreated, the severe consequence of that is where people then look at taking away their lives.
Now, we're going to talk in a while about the Blue Whale suicide game. We're not quite sure if it has reached our shores. We pray that it doesn't. We're also going to be looking at Bluetooth. Do you believe that these type of these games of you know, where you're actually playing with your life, you know, these games of chance are linked to people who probably have some sort of a mental condition? Because I can't even begin to put my mind to it that any rational, sane, level-headed person would indulge in such games.
Look, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we strongly believe that there is, you know, some underlying, you know, psychological or emotional distress. You know, these youngsters that have actually, you know, obviously lost their lives to Blue Whale or linked to Blue Whale. You know,
And we're going to unpack that in a minute or two.
Yes, you know, so remember, you know, our brain obviously being a complex, you know, organ of our body, but, you know, it also functions in specific ways. So when you are actually going through a type of a mental disorder or a psychological, you know, disorder, your brain is not functioning very well. So therefore, you are then unable to maybe be rational, as you indicated, because unfortunately there are certain hormones, you know, or chemicals in your brain that are deficient. So therefore, that then affects how then your brain functions, which then will make you more vulnerable, you know, to then engage in something like, you know, this Blue Whale, you know, suicide game. So you look at that as almost as if it's, you know, it's a normal thing that you know, you should be doing. And that's how then, you know, it becomes very attractive, you know, to a person who is in that state.
We're going to talk about why teenagers would, and we're suggesting perhaps they're not thinking rationally. What exactly is this Blue Whale suicide game?
This, in fact, it was invented by quite a youngster. I mean, he's about 21 years old in Russia. He has subsequently been arrested. And also, you know, we question, I mean, you know, I think this boy's status, mental state, you know, status should also be investigated. He has obviously been arrested. His purpose or his objective, he says, for starting or inventing this online game was to cleanse the society, you know, he says. So that already tells you that there could be, you know, some underlying, you know, psychological, you know, issues or psychological, you know, disease or of some sorts. That has then spread from Russia, obviously into the other parts of the world, into the UK. We know that in Africa, it has made its first appearance in Kenya, and there's been 2 teen deaths that have been linked, to blue whale online suicide game.
What exactly is it? Talk us through.
Yes.
What is it, and what should parents be looking out for?
It's so basically this game, it gives tasks for these youngsters to complete. So once you then have got this on
And
your
it's targeted
online,
at teenagers only.
well, it's aimed at at teenagers. As you look at the person who invented it, he's also quite a youngster. So it gives about 50 tasks, including things like you watching horror movies, self-mutilation, where you have to cut this whale into your skin, so self-harming, which we know as well that self-harming is also linked to some type of psychological pathology, and ultimately the last task that then you need to complete is where you then kill yourself. It actually states that on the game to say kill yourself. That's the last step. And when you do that, you then also have to then record how then you actually execute that task. So it's about 50 days or 50 tasks that are linked that you have to religiously obviously do to ultimately get to a point where you take away
We're
your
going
life.
to unpack that after the ad break. I'm talking from Kenny Pasha. He comes from a medical background, obviously. He's a medical scientist. He also volunteers. He's been with SADC for over 10 years, and he currently works for a pharmaceutical. We're talking about the blue whale suicide game, and we're also going to be looking at Bluetooth, the rage that has taken South African townships by storm. It's not a pretty story, but do stay with us. We're talking to Nkeni Pasha. He's with SADC. And you might be wondering why on earth we're talking about the blue whale suicide game. You're probably also thinking it's not going to touch us. It's not going to touch our community. It's meaningless to us. It hasn't yet hit our shores. And Nkeni has told me that we don't have any reported cases here in South Africa. So why are we in fact talking about it, Nkeni?
As a South African Depression and Anxiety Group, we really are urging, our society at large to really be aware, number one.
To be proactive.
To take precautionary steps. So at least now that, you've got this information, you can be a little bit more vigilant in terms of, what is going on with your youngster. And then, as they say, prevention is better than cure. To make sure that we are a step ahead, that we don't sit back and really regret that now we are sitting with a number of teen deaths that are associated to this game. We already unfortunately in South Africa, the statistics are quite alarming when it comes to teen deaths. We know that at least more than 10% of teen deaths in South Africa are linked to suicide. So this is telling us that really a lot of our young people are looking to taking away their lives as the solution, to whatever challenges, to whether emotional or psychological challenges that they're grappling with in their lives.
Or perhaps they think it's a game. They don't realize the finality of their actions.
You see, when you are vulnerable, as I indicated, we've got this underlying psychological and emotional distress. It sort of encourages you because now you find yourself in this community. You feel that now, actually, I've got more the confidence to carry through what I've already been thinking about. We know that over 70% of people that suffer from a mental illness such as depression will think of taking away their lives. So there is a very strong association or strong link between the two. So if you are that vulnerable and something like this comes along, it really gives you that boost because now you feel that, actually I'm not alone. actually, I can do this. You're getting guided, throughout the journey or the path to ultimately getting to a point where you end it all. It is really, really, really very shocking and very, very dangerous.
What should parents be looking out for, very especially with their teenage children? I know the one thing you'll say is closely monitor, the usage of their devices.
Yes.
But are there any specifics that parents should be looking out for so that the alarm bell, goes off? And once they do find that something is untoward here, whom do they go to for help? Where do they go to? What are they going to do?
Indeed. I mean, I like that question. I always say that parents, let us parent our children. Let us be parents. Let us be actively invested in our kids' lives. What we are seeing is that a lot of parents, we throw money, we throw gadgets at our children, at the problem, inverted commas. And you know what? We understand that there are challenges, there are social challenges as well that a lot of families are faced with. You've got more and more of single parent, homes. But it is important that as a parent, you are actively involved. You communicate openly with your child. But also, don't just provide your child with a smartphone or an iPad and not know and not take interest in what exactly is it that they are doing on those gadgets. Cyberspace is it's a dark and very dangerous. Yes, it's got its benefits, but it can also be very, very dangerous. So it's important for parents to really, really make time to be there, to engage, to ask questions, to want to see what is it that you are doing on your smartphone? What sites are you visiting as my child? Now, some parents might not necessarily be techno-savvy, then where you buy your smartphone, get the help from there to say, assist me with setting safety or security, features on this device so that my child is not exposed to certain parts of the cyber, world or cyberspace. So those are just some of the steps that parents can take. But also, when then you identify that there is a problem, that, my child is now behaving in a manner that is different, because we know that there's certain signs that you can actually be on the lookout for. Like, for example, change in mood, significant change in mood. They'll want to lock themselves up and not want to engage with the rest of the family, They might not want to take part in the hobbies that they were, previously, really liked or enjoyed partaking in. Their academic performance, will be impacted on negatively. So those are just some of the signs or warning signs, as we call them, that you can be on the lookout for. When you then pick up that there could be a problem, or even if you are in doubt, then get in touch with us as the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. We've got trained counselors that operate our contact center 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then we can then begin to assist you. Even if you are in doubt, rather ask. Than be sorry, and maybe even if you just, maybe being too sensitive or too cautious, rather be than to sit back and then feel that, I failed my child. I could have been there. I could have been present. So get in touch with us and we'll be able, to offer you the help and the support that you require, whether you are a parent, an educator, or even as a youngster, feel free to contact us.
Very quickly, would you, off the top of your head, be able to tell us what would be the type of signs, as far as the blue whale suicide game is concerned, that parents could pick up on?
Remember, if somebody is already thinking about ending their lives, if somebody's already thinking about taking away their lives, for example, self-mutilization, if that person is self-harming, be on the lookout, chances are that they'll forever be wanting to cover the parts of their bodies where obviously they have injured themselves. So if maybe it's hot or your child does not forever in long sleeves and really covering up certain areas, you should start asking questions. But also we know that already if somebody's thinking about taking away their lives, they'll start giving away the things that they held dear or material possessions that they really valued. But also they'll start talking about death. a lot more often. Their mood will change, as I indicated, the significant, change in mood, persistent sadness, their sleeping patterns are going to change, because part of this game also involves tasks that, will say to the youngsters, wake up at the, wee hours of the morning and do X, Y, and Z, so those are just some of the things that you can look out for. Eating patterns will change. We know that, some people, their appetite will be lost. Others will actually engage in what we call comfort eating. Some will sleep for extended hours of hours, but then they wake up feeling completely tired and they just don't have the drive or the energy.
And that's a sign of depression, is that not?
That is also a sign of depression.
Okay.
So those we know that oftentimes the warning signs or the symptoms are also quite linked to either depression or a type of an anxiety disorder.
Well, let's pray that blue whale doesn't come to our shores. It's close enough to home as it is. 2 cases reported in Kenya.
Indeed.
Would you know why the word blue whale, for example? What's the significance of the name?
It's what we understand is that is obviously attributed to the fact that the whale will bitch itself, and that's really sort of the rationale behind giving it this name. That ultimately this is what you also are going to be doing as a person, that you ultimately are going to take away your life. So that is the link that we've been able to sort of associate with the naming of this online the suicide online game.
Closer to home, a very, very worrying trend playing out in our townships, and that is Bluetooth.
Yes.
Obviously, it is in the community of drug-dependent youth. Talk to us about that, and I know the health department is very concerned about it. Do you perhaps know if there are steps being put in place to try and contain this practice? What exactly is Bluetooth?
So Bluetooth, as we know, with some of the recreational drugs that have been have made or surfaced in our communities, particularly in townships, it's a concoction of a whole lot of ingredients, or a whole lot of
deadly ingredients.
Now with Bluetooth, basically, if you think of something like what we call nyaupe, for example, it's really I would say it's a much more concentrated form. But what then happens is that these youngsters will then take that concoction, they will then dissolve it, and then inject it into their bloodstream. What then happens is that I will inject myself, I will then withdraw my blood, and then give it to the next person to then inject themselves. So not only are we sharing the needle, but actually we are exchanging our body fluids, and which is blood. And of course, we know the dangers of that. That not only are you looking at things like, HIV that can be transmitted, via, exchanging, each other's blood, but also things like, hepatitis. So it is really, really, really very dangerous and very risky to do so. So the whole concept of Bluetooth, remember, if, I want to send you a file, using our smartphones, that's, we sort of connect, but sort of in virtually connection, if I can call it that. So this whole thing of then I take the original, drug into my system, I withdraw it, and then I give it to you, and that's hence the whole naming, of this Bluetooth. So it's quite a shocking and really dangerous way of administering this drug. In terms of the steps that government has or Department of Health has tried to to engage, we know that in some communities they've actually gone out. They've tried to engage with community members. Of course, parents of these youngsters that are taking these drugs, they've been involved, to say, or crying out for help to the DOH. They've set up some rehabilitation centers where some of these youngsters were taken into. But we know that, after about a day or a week, they then leave in their droves and go back into the communities and go back into that habit.
They're so addicted. They are so addicted that it's going to be quite a problem trying to rehabilitate them. But in the process, they could be killing themselves, could they not?
They are absolutely killing themselves. I mean, there is without a doubt. I mean, South Africa, has one of the highest HIV pandemics, in the world. So there is absolutely no doubt that the risk of contracting, very fatal, diseases increases in the manner in which they are actually administering this drug.
And that's where we have to leave it. The charming Nkini Pasha talking to us about the blue whale suicide game. Please God, let it not come to our shores. And also Bluetooth, the rage that has taken the townships by storm. And of course, these are horror stories, but we do need to make you aware of what is playing out on our very doorstep. We do hope that that was informative. I know it wasn't a pretty story, but at least inform you about what is going on in and around the communities we're living in. Next on the show, we're going to be talking to the brain guru. She is Colleen Lightbody, and I'm quite looking forward to this discussion. Do stay with us. Lines are open. If you call in, you walk away with one of our giveaways for today, which is a sweet hamper from Broadway Sweets or a hair care hamper from Amca. And now I'm really excited to have the brain guru in the studio with me. And we're going to be talking about how to train your brain. Yes, it is possible at any stage in your life. So says Colleen Lightbody. She's from an organization or her own consultancy talking to us today about BrainWise. Morning, welcome to the show, Colleen.
Hi, Julie.
Okay, you are known as the brain guru. Why?
Well, it's probably a bit of a flashy name that some people have started to call me by, because I teach people about how their brain works, how to use their brain more effectively, the possibilities of the brain, which most people are pretty unaware of.
Isn't growing, well, the natural process of growing up, your brain grows with you, your environment, your learning, etc., has an impact on you as a person, your personality. And by so doing, you reach a point in your life and you are this personality sitting in front of me, and that's it. Why would I want to retrain my brain at this stage of my life? And is it possible?
So the exciting news is that it's possible to change right throughout your lifetime, and to change profound capacities like intelligence and emotional regulation, and even beliefs that you have that are perhaps negative beliefs. You can become, more optimistic and more in charge of your thinking. And like I say, you can change right throughout your lifetime, because there's a very important concept in neuroscience called neuroplasticity. And what neuroplasticity says is that the brain is capable of change. The brain is not rigid and solid. It is amenable to change. But here's the deal. You have to want to. So we are a product of our experience and our education and our culture and our conditioning. However, we have the opportunity to change what we want to change.
Okay, let's assume I'm a very, very angry person. I'm angry at the whole world and even angry at myself. That is due to all the conditioning and my circumstances, environment as I was growing up. Mm-hmm. Is it just that, or was I born that way as a very angry person? Is there some sort of a short circuit in my brain to make me this very angry person? And if you agree that there is a short circuit, can it be fixed?
So it's fairly complicated. It's a both and. We are born with certain genetic tendencies, certain temperaments. However, this knowledge of neuroplasticity has made us understand that we are profoundly capable of changing what we are genetically endowed with. So we have the capacity to, through environmental stimulation opportunities, but even through our own volition, we have the capacity to actually shift what may be an instinctive kind of response. So yes, I may be a more angry person, however, I can learn to manage that. I can learn to be in control of my emotions. Not necessarily just switching flicking a switch. However, by growing the muscle in our brains in order to, because the brain is like a muscle, whichever part of it you use grows stronger and thicker and more useful and denser. So if you're using the part of your brain to manage emotions, if you're training that part, then you can activate it whenever necessary, under whatever circumstances.
How did you become the brain guru? What's the story behind the brain guru?
So I'm 51 years old, and 10 years ago, I had a bit of a transformational experience, a catalytic experience, and I started to discover about what I was actually capable of. I actually was pretty useless at school. I'm not that smart and never interested in studying. But what I started to discover was about how possible, what we're capable of if we start to use our brain effectively. I started to learn about neuroscience. I started to learn about psychology.
What were you doing at that point in your life when this awareness came about?
I had a very different job to what I do now. I was actually a beautician.
Oh my word!
For 20 years. And
Okay.
then I started to gather my degrees, and I started to gather experience and qualifications, and most of all, brain knowledge. I think I had a lot of very lucky opportunities come my way. And I've just become more and more passionate, not only because of the actual knowledge is just so fascinating, and most people are so fascinated by it, but because of what I changed in myself. So I kind of walk the walk.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you changed your life, you've turned your life around. What are you doing with all of this knowledge that you've acquired? Surely it needs to be put to good use. So how are you putting it to good use?
So that really talks to my core purpose and my passion in life, which is really about showing people what they're capable of. Julie, people profoundly underestimate their capacity in every way, whether it's academics, whether it's sport, health, emotional well-being. People underestimate what they're capable of. So that's what I do is I go and teach people what is possible and give techniques as well as to how to improve your functioning in whichever area it is that you're wanting to
My
improve.
example about the angry person, and let's take another example, a sports person. How do you work with people like this, and how long does it take? And I guess I'm asking you really, how long is a piece of string? Because it would differ from person to person. But let's talk about the type of work you do with me, an angry person, and a sports person who's doing fairly well but wants to reach the top of his or her game. How does brain-wise or brain power enable them to overcome and to achieve?
Again, I'm at the risk of sounding really hitting this hard, but it's about firstly understanding what you're capable of. So once people understand that, then I get much more buy-in. So when an angry person knows it's possible to control their anger, an athlete knows it's possible to improve their performance. Whether you're an executive, whether you're at learning, studying, whatever it is, you're capable of much more. Then what we do is we have to find the want to. Because if there's no want to change, then people don't change. So we find out, I help people discover how's life going to be different, what's meaningful about that change. And really we work a lot with embedding that. Motivation is very important. And then we use different techniques, whether it's understanding self-awareness is quite critical. Understanding how to manage my mind and how to be in control of my thinking. Very, very important. That's kind of one of the most important things.
If someone has told me from the time I was a little girl that I'm stupid, right into possibly my 20s, how am I going to undo that? Because it's locked inside my brain that I am stupid, I am useless, I will amount to nothing. How much work is that going to involve? And give me examples of the type of exercises you take me through for me to start
to change that belief.
Affirming myself, loving myself. Is it about that?
So very important when I say self-awareness, so it's to understand what kind of conditioning I have and what kind of self-talk I am using, or what has been told to me that I've now taken on as the truth. So understanding that and where it comes from. It's not a deep therapeutic dive into all the details of your past, but very good to get that kind of awareness. And then from that point is to, how do I replace that with positive beliefs about myself? Because whatever we believe is what we become.
True.
Okay, so you can't undo wiring. We have to understand that you're actually never going to remove those conditioned beliefs and wiring that you've had from your childhood or from your life experiences, from traumatic experiences also. You know, you're never going to remove that. However, what we can do is we can replace it with better thinking. So the more you use any part of your brain, the stronger it becomes, you know, neuroplasticity. So the more you think about jealous thoughts, and the more you gossip, and the more you think negativity, you're growing that part of your brain. So what we want to do, we want to exercise other muscles. And we do that through, I mean, things like mantras, things like visualizations. Visualizations is an incredibly powerful tool to use. Many other different tools. And my favorite and most powerful is through meditation.
Okay, we're going to talk more about it after the ad break. I'm talking to the brain guru. She says that anything is possible. You can change your mindset. You can start believing in yourself. You can tell yourself that you are great, you are powerful, and you're wonderful. It's the how. We'll talk about that after the ad break. And we're into the final segment. My heart time flies when you're having fun. And I certainly am having fun with Colleen Lightbody. We're talking about healthy brains. We're talking about how to train your brain to be a better being. And that is what it's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely, using your brain more effectively.
Mm-hmm. If you go this path, I engage with you and you become almost like a life coach to me for a couple of months because I want to maximize everything good in my life. Is it possible? Is it doable? And how am I going to turn everything around? Self-limiting beliefs I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
And so forth.
It takes time and it takes commitment. I always say success doesn't fall out the sky and land on your head. It takes effort, it takes commitment, it takes self-control, it takes courage. And I tell people that. I don't do a lot of one-on-one work, but what I do mostly is I go and teach people about their brains, how their brains function and how to use their brains better. In coaching, it's more of an individual process of really getting that person to fulfill their possibility, their potential.
I've heard in the past about the 4 brain quadrants, and then I've also heard about the left brain. Dr. Kobus Neethling, I'm sure you've heard of him and you've read of his work. Yeah. So he talks about the left brain and the right brain and the 4 quadrants, and he often says if you understand where you sit and you understand your partner, the people you work with, the results and the relationship will be very, very amenable. Do you agree with that?
I'm a little controversial in that I'm not crazy about assessments in terms of the fact that people, we love labels. So as soon as I give you a label and I tell you that you are a green or you are a XYZ, that's what we then become. That's what we then manifest. Like we said, whatever we believe is what we produce. True. So I can argue that. However, understanding how a person's brain works can be very empowering when you engaging with that person, particularly the differences between men's brains and women's brains.
Ah, okay. And is there a difference?
Oh, yes, okay. Plenty
what is
of differences.
That difference?
Well, men have bigger brains than women do.
Really?
Yes.
Does that mean they're more intelligent than women? I can't accept
Wait, I'm
that.
getting there.
Okay.
They've got more brain cells than women do.
All right.
Okay.
They don't use them.
No. We can't make those kind of comments. We've got 2 sides to the brain,
right,
and joined together by the corpus callosum. Mm-hmm. Okay, women have got bigger corpus callosums than men do. Okay. So this means, so what this means is when a man processes information, we process analytical, logical, kind of rational information mostly in our left hemisphere. We process creative, imaginative kind of information mostly in our right hemisphere. If you put a man under a brain scan and he's having an argument or a discussion proving his point, he will predominantly have a one-way flow of electrochemical activity predominantly in the left hemisphere. Men tend to use that side more. So a man will be logical, rational, and analytical in his argument, whereas a woman will cross the hemispheres much more and use creativity and imagination and the past and Also, the right hemisphere processes more negative emotions, so the woman will use more drama in her arguments.
Okay.
That's the difference between men and women.
And that is why you're always having these arguments. What were you thinking? Or you don't understand
It's
me,
two different brains.
But when we talk about brain and harnessing and getting the best out of your brain, I should imagine brain health, like the rest of your body health, is important.
Yeah.
Would diet and lifestyle also play a role here?
Oh, absolutely. And people need to understand what good, healthy brain habits are. Probably one of the most important things you can ever ensure that you do well is sleep. Sleep is incredibly important for the brain. There's a lot of research to do with sleep and learning, that a lack of sleep really limits the ability for the brain to wire information. Sleep and age-related brain diseases. If there's one thing people are going to do differently, okay, two things. One is get good sleep, okay, good quality sleep and enough sleep. The other one is exercise. The brain functions off blood flow, oxygen, water, and when we're not getting that flow through our brain, we're not stimulating our brains effectively. Plus, exercise stimulates new neuronal growth. So we should actually be exercising a minimum of 40 minutes a day, 7 days a week, cardiovascularly, for good brain health.
Let's look at the issue around Alzheimer's or the different dementias. I'm wondering if you come from a family, where you do have a history. What should you be doing in possibly your 40s and 50s? Is there anything you can do to hopefully not become a victim of one of those diseases?
So interestingly enough, early onset Alzheimer's is directly related to genetic factors. Later onset has much less correlation. So they're still not absolutely sure whether there is an actual gene that causes late onset Alzheimer's. But what we have discovered... Later
onset would be approximately at what age group?
Anything over 50, 60. Okay. So, to get in your 30s or 40s, there's usually a very strong direct genetic link. But there has been a lot of research in the ability to prevent and slow down the progress of age-related brain diseases through good brain health. Exercise, very much exercise, cognitive stimulation, not sitting watching the TV, unless it's programs like this, which are educational, doing Sudoku, even going to theatre. Social, very important for the brain, engaging in social. A lot of older people are isolated, which is very experienced as traumatic for the brain. So all these good brain health habits have been shown to have a profound effect on slowing down the onset and the progress.
We talked earlier on about affirmations, etc. So really what we're saying is the power of positive thinking. Does that truly work wonders if it becomes a mantra in your life?
Okay, I'm a little controversial here because I don't really subscribe to the search for happiness and, we must always be happy, because I believe that we are emotional beings, that we experience sadness, we experience happiness, we experience failure, we experience success. So we experience all of these experiences. It's about being able to be present in our experiences and learn from them and grow from them. So the positive thinker can also be a little bit hammered by life because they're always optimistically thinking everything's going to be okay. Let's be realistic, but do it in a way that we trust ourselves and we trust our responses to those events. And in fact, the traumas, the sadnesses, the dark experiences in our lives are often the greatest teachers for us if we work with it effectively.
What about a lot of moms, you hear this all the time, when you tell youngsters or even children, you can be, you can do it. You can be whatever you want to be if you just set your mind to it. You can conquer the world. You could be the next president. What are you saying to those children or those young people? Are they in fact listening to you? And can they buy into what you're saying? And is it doable?
I really believe that anyone is capable, this is a big statement, is capable of achieving whatever it is they want to achieve. And like I said before, you have to want to. So, for example, would you like to be a star football player? I'm assuming that you're not a football player, by the way.
No, definitely not.
So, because you haven't got the capacity to be a football player, but you wanted to be a presenter on TV because you have the capacity to do it. So we're not going to want something that we don't have the capacity to achieve.
Right.
Okay, so I truly believe that's what we need to do with our with young people. Not just say the world isn't your oyster. Not everything is possible. However, if you want something, if you put in the effort, the commitment, if you have the courage and you have the self-discipline, then you're capable of achieving it. So it's not just la la land.
Right.
There's work that has to be done, but you can achieve it.
Anything is possible
if you want to
apply your mind to it.
And if you apply yourself.
And that's where we leave it.
Good.
Your take-home message to our viewers this morning
is, I think, you are capable of achieving much, much more than you think you are. And learn about your brain, understand your brain, and keep good brain health habits.
Thank you for being with us. I
Thank you.
certainly am going to start doing that. That was the lovely Colleen Lightbody, better known in corporate circles as the Brain Guru. That brings us to the end of the show today. And just a reminder that we won't be with you on Saturday. That's Let's Talk will not be here on Saturday. ITV is going to Cape Town to cover an amazing live event, so we do hope you're going to enjoy that. I'll be back with you, with the rest of the team, of course, on Wednesday morning at the same time. So a very big thank you from the entire Let's Talk team here at ITV Networks. Let's wrap up with our thought of the day, which is, if you don't build your dream, someone will hire you to help build theirs. As always, thank you for being with me. Till the next time, Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz.
Ya hala, 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا، حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا، يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا، يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا، يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا